Welcome, everyone. Today, it is my distinguished pleasure because I have Shayla Locklear in the Global Wisdom Talk. And, I follow Shayla since a couple of months on my LinkedIn channel. And Shayla is very proactive on LinkedIn with very intelligent posts on wealth and mental wealth. And it's much appreciated. Welcome, Shayla, that I have the pleasure to have you today on the talk.
Thank you so much, Jan. I'm so excited to be here and have this discussion with you. It's long overdue, but I'm glad we're here now.
Yeah. So before we jump in our discussion today, please introduce yourself to the audience, and maybe there is anybody that who don't know you.
Yes, yes. I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't know me, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's also by design.
That's
But
true. That's true.
anyway, my name is Shayla Locklear. I am a wealth psychology high performance coach. I'm a family wealth advisor and a succession and family governance consultant for ultra high net worth families. So I tend to say that I work with the non-financial side of wealth and success, although we're still talking about money. But that is me in a nutshell.
That's great. That's great. So I will start with a little story.
Okay.
And the story is, you and I guess, we know exactly that what is standing in front of our door, or it's just moving through the door, and that it's just the great wealth transfer everybody is talking about. And
Mhm.
it is interesting. Many people talking only and only about the money, right?
Right.
What's the sum of all these stuff? And in many discussion, I come up with the term. I say, yes, that's the first wealth transfer of what we see in history. But the next is standing in front of the door, and it will be larger. It will be
Yeah.
bigger. It will be affected more individuals and more families. And
Right.
in each discussion, I raised the question: have anybody a clue what does it actually means? These kind of money, and I will put these questions in front of you. Can you give me just an idea? What is your perspective on this wealth transfer?
Great question. So I find it funny in that my limited time on this earth, I've learned to pick up patterns, right? In our history and in everything, because that will teach us everything that we need to know. So granted, we look at this wealth transfer as like, oh my gosh, it's the biggest wealth transfer in history. You have to think about prior generations. I'm sure they said the same thing about the wealth transfer in that specific. Everything's like the biggest wealth transfer you've ever seen, which is true. Like in our, generation or generations, this is a huge wealth transfer. We've never seen money like this. We have never seen money like this. But when we look in history, they thought the same thing. They thought absolutely the same thing. I think the difference that we're experiencing now is with the rise in technology, the rise in the amount of money that's available, the type of money that's available, like you said in your question, like when we think about wealth as a whole, like it's very nuanced. It's not just money. So when we think about the great wealth transfer that's happening, and they say, I don't even know, the number changes every day. What, about like what's coming. So we don't even know the exact number that's coming. But there's so many different levels of wealth that's being transferred in this particular generation. And I think that's why it's so big. We're seeing things differently than we have before because I don't want to say we're more advanced. We just have more information and we're just more conscious to what wealth really actually means. And it's absolutely more than just the dollars and cents of things.
Right, right. So my perspective is number one, we are moving in a century of democratization of wealth, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by this is just we will see over the next decade and over the next 30 years and 50 years in an increasing count of more families with significant wealth. And
Yes.
what I mean by this is significant wealth is, in my definition, more than 100 million
Yep.
in US or in euro. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And on one side, yes, there are a lot of wealth creators around. They are creating this kind of wealth. And on the flip side of this, there are, I call it many often, the meteor is coming. And what I
Mhm.
mean by this is just, yes, you are maybe in a second generation or third generation, and you see the meteor on the horizon, but
Yeah.
never know when exactly this meteor will hit the button, right? So it would be interesting to hear from you, from your experience in working with individuals, with entrepreneurs and families as well. I mean, if you are the second or third generation, and it is, I would say, the right definition, the meteor, you never have created that kind of wealth. It is, in the end of the day, not yours, right?
Mhm.
How can you implement this kind of wealth in your life, in your family? What kind of challenges are waiting around the corner? Can you give us just a little perception from your point of view?
Yes. So I love the way that you put that. And what's really interesting about this is if you think about the wealth creators, right? And then second gen, third gen. And you said, we've never created this type or this amount of wealth. And so the interesting part about it is I look at the wealth creators as the fact of they haven't either. Like this is brand new in a
Right,
sense,
right,
right?
right.
And so when you look at G2 and G3 and they haven't created this, well, G1 are the original creator. They're just figuring this out. So they really, it's hard to say this, they really can't completely advise G2 or G3 on how to deal with it because they're just figuring it out. Like they don't know either. This is not, we're not talking about the Rockefellers, we're not talking about steel money or like commodity. We're talking about this newer
Yeah,
type of money and wealth is being created.
yeah,
And it's faster and faster and faster than we've ever been able to do it, and in numbers that we've never seen. So we have to be aware that even the wealth creators who typically, I mean, unless you're coming from old money, which is slowly going away, right?
yeah,
And this is what we would consider newer money. They don't know how to tell you what to do because they don't know what to do. They know how to create, and their minds and eyes are even blown by what they're able to do. And then they are just like, hey, here you go, kind of. I'm not quite sure how you do this
yeah.
because it's rapidly changing. It's so fast. Like everything is moving so fast right now. Billionaires are being created overnight. You're able to run companies now that used to take 10, 15 years to build in a year. Like
Absolutely. Yes.
it's so different. So when I look at G2 and G3, and the other thing is, if these individuals are not entrepreneurial, right? If they're just heirs or receiving, the capacity to receive the type of wealth that they are coming into from creators who don't even know actually how to deal with it just yet,
Yeah,
it's so much pressure.
yeah,
And it's the wealth creator also thinking like they're trying, but they don't also want to say, I don't really know what I'm doing here. So it's almost like, this is a gift. I figured it out. You should be able to as well. Like, come on. But we're entering a territory that none of us have ever seen. So I think that we have to give ourselves grace. We have to be very malleable, which is how and we have to be open for transformation and change. We have to when I specifically when I'm working with a lot of my clients, it's okay to say I don't know. And that's the other thing that is very different in this field because typically you would think you should know everything, right? You have all this money, you should know. No, you don't know. But we can also figure this out together. We can also work together. We can also, create our own, right? Like our own way. Because the thing is, as a trailblazer, as someone who creates the path, you don't have anybody in front of you. You're doing it.
Sure, sure.
And so most of these, wealth creators are trailblazers. They're creating the path, but you don't know the path that you create while you're creating it.
Right.
And as a G2 and G3 who is gifted in a sense this, it's different than earning or making the money. Now you have to be a steward of an egregious amount of money that you've never in your life figured out. That's hard. That's hard. It's okay to say that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah, I completely with you, and I will come up with an example. What I have a couple of weeks ago, I had a discussion with a family. They are in the third generation. They have three siblings, global family. Their father passed away 3 years ago, and it was chaos.
Yeah.
Nothing was prepared. And they have a very significant wealth. And the older sister, we had a discussion about legacy and purpose and all these stuff. And she come up to me and said, "Listen, I'm not for looking for legacy or purpose or stuff like that." She was explaining that she is considering about a vision, a strategy for the family, how they can stay relevant, significant,
Mhm.
but also
Mhm.
with a positive influence over centuries, right?
Mhm.
And she said, "Yeah, I have these thoughts in my head, but in the end of the day, what kind of frame can I set up for me personally, but
Mhm.
also for my brother and for my sister and for the entire family?" And in the end of the day, she come up with the question, okay, it's just these traditional term family by bloodline.
Yeah.
Is this just the successful pathway, or is it just maybe to say, okay, let's figure out what hold us together and make everybody just the option to say, yes, you can be part of this, but you have
Yeah.
also the option to say, no, that isn't just my pathway. So my question is to you, do you see the same development evolutionary wise on these next, I call it just the next generation family types, that they are more interested to come together as a family of affinity, a tribe, but they have in very few cases they have a clue what does it actually means, right?
Yeah.
Um, is this what you also see and recognize?
Very much so. So, as you said, like we have this traditional view of family, right? And although that is still here in these types of cases, especially when it comes to extreme wealth, we get to broaden our understanding and of what family actually is because we have to. You don't have a choice. Like you really don't have a choice.
Right,
I mean, we would love to all be very similar to like the Hermes family, right? Who 6 generations in is still leading a 200, well, almost $300 billion, company
right,
in the family,
right,
literally in the family.
right,
That's great. Should we could all take a page out of their book, but that is not the truth of what's actually happening now. So we have to get creative with our definition of family and be okay with that as well. And also look at like there's so much strategy, right? We're very linear thinkers, ABCs and one, two, threes, especially when you have a lot of wealth. And that's very helpful. Clearly, obviously, you
yeah,
have money manager, you have all these people involved to be very, ABC one, two, three, very linear thinking. But you also need to look at what I call the other side. So there's the very like what do I want to say? It's the you have to look at the ethereal or the spiritual or the other side of things, because that is what's going to move the needle. So like she said, when we look at like family values, because the strategy, and I think that we're learning this more and more and more, and I'm seeing this more and more and more with my families as they're learning that they could put a strategy in place, they could put a trust in place, they could put a succession plan in place, they could put everything in place, 175 pages of whatever you want to call it, and tomorrow that could be completely obsolete.
Absolutely. Yes.
So we have to be able to look at the other part of these things. You have to be able to look at what's the, like she said, she wants a framework, right? What are the values that my family stands for that no matter what, 10 generations down the line will still be what we stand for, even if our family's in a completely different, industry than maybe we started in. And I think that's more important. And that's actually, yes, like you said, that's what I've been seeing people more interested in, because we have to be able to understand the other side of wealth, and also how we want to, the other side of legacy as well. Legacy used to be very concrete. This is what we are. This is what we've always been, right? This is Coca-Cola. This is Pepsi. This is Nike, right? This is what we've always been. But that is going away. And so we have to be able, in order to create the legacy, the lasting legacy that you desire, it's going to be based on the framework, based on those values, those very intrinsic type of things. Like it's not going to be something that we can look on, on the family governance papers, page 100.
Absolutely agreed. And if you allow me, I'll give you just what my advice was
Yeah.
to her. And my advice was, yes, on the one hand side, everybody's talking about values and mission statements and stuff like that. But the history taught us that, I mean, you see a value statement and a mission statement in each enterprise, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah,
So
exactly.
I've come up with an idea and say, okay, what about the term, and that's just, I would say, just a spotlight over the framework, and it is one sentence, 1 second, wow. And I repeated, 1 second, wow. And she came and said, what do you mean by this? And I said, can you consider there's an other family, you don't see their family, they are just maybe in Europe or stuff like that, and they recognize what you as a family do, and it is only 1 second, 1 second, wow.
Mhm.
That is what you bring on light. I call it light, right? And in the end of the day, your light as a beacon, right? That you are a beacon for other families. And I mean, coming up, what you described correctly is what drives you as a family, right? What is it? What do you want to achieve, not only in your generation, but what is it what you want to achieve over the next century? Because, I mean, surprise, surprise, and positive surprise, we will live longer, right? And
Right.
hopefully, you and I will be, maybe we met us in 80 years, and we will
Exactly.
be 100,
Yeah.
and we will have it in a discussion. So it is possible that you achieve these four generation, maybe fifth generation family. And it is just also what we have discussed previously in regards of this democratization of wealth. Are there more families, and you have an increasing competition among your family, right? And that is just as a spotlight. One
Yeah.
second, wow, and it was amazing, right? So my question is if I can pick up just you on a journey, and let's have a spotlight and an outlook over the next decade, in 30 years, in 50 years. And we are standing now, what kind of challenges do you see now in families? What are the main topics? If there's a family or an individual approach you and ask you, can you help me with this? That's
Right.
number one. And number two, do you see an increasing demand on these challenges, what you support, what you self help? What is it, what you bring as a value, and how do you serve these families?
Absolutely. So what I've seen just in my work is one of the biggest concerns that these families are having is it's twofold. One is the heirs of the next generation really not being in line with the current family values or the current way that the company is going, and then deciding like they don't want to be a part of it. I don't stand for it. I don't want to do it. I'm not interested. Yeah, I know we've got an $80 billion empire and I'm like the only one. And I'm over it. I'm not like, I don't want to do it. I want to go
Yeah.
paint in the Alps. Like, I don't want to do this. So it's re-engaging G2, G3 into the family lineage and business, but doing it in a way that serves all. So we're not talking about, kind of beating them over the head until they fall in line. We're talking about us coming together and making a win-win for all, which means the wealth creator has to, I don't like to say compromise. I never tell people they have to compromise, but you have to be willing to see things differently. And you both have to be willing to come, all, not both, not just both, all, be willing to come to the table to have the real conversations that it's going to take
Yeah.
in order to move this forward. So, and that's not always the easiest, because a lot of times these relationships with not only self, with not only family, but also with wealth are very convoluted and nuanced and challenging. And it's something that they've never really looked at before. So while surface level, you think it's just that, hey, my child or my grandchild or whatever else doesn't want to be part of the business, and now I have a, $80 billion fortune I have no clue what to do with. Like, I don't even know how to deal with this right now.
Yeah.
That's very surface. It's more so like, hey, we've never had the conversation about what you like, what you're great at, how you could actually be of service to this opportunity rather than me just plugging and playing you inside of this organization, this corporation, and you're become a high paid employee and a mouthpiece. So that's one. The
Okay.
second, right. And the second part of it, and what I see very often is like G2, G3 and beyond, things of that sort, is the passing of the torch. And what I mean by that is being willing to learn from each generation.
Mhm.
So what typically happens is that, as we talked about, the wealth creators oftentimes are very set in their ways. And they're like, this is how you do this, and this is how you do that, and this is how we're going to continue to move forward to do this. But in the world that we live in now, the technological world, the world of AI, the world where everything is moving at the speed of light, that's not always going to work. And so what the great part about G2 and G3 is they live in this world. They've grown up in this world. They know things that the wealth creator doesn't.
Right.
But it's hard to accept that, right? When you're like, hey, I've created this $100 million empire and you're telling me you know better than me? And sometimes, yes. Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
So being able to once again merge the generations and have these conversations where we are learning from each other, and it's not this competition. It's not who's better, what's better, this, that. It is how do we once again come together for the greater good to create this legacy for our family that's going to last 100 years when 100 years is now 2 minutes. You know, that's how fast we
Yeah.
move.
Yeah.
And so what I'm able to provide and what I do for my clients is I am that I don't want to say I'm that middleman. It's not that. It's I work with everybody typically when we look at families. So that's the great part where I'm not just working with G1 or G2 or I'm working with everybody. So I'm able to hear all sides of the story. I coach and I support and I advise them separately and together. So I know all the inner workings of every single person and I know the triggers. I understand everything that's going on with each individual so that I have a better perspective, especially when we come together on how to create win-win situations for all. So we're talking about wealth psychology. We're talking about relationship to self, wealth, identity, which is huge and when it comes to money. We're talking about skill sets, you know, what are we actually good at? We're talking about wants, needs, desires that most likely these aren't happening with the board, right? Nobody
Right.
cares about what you want. Like, we're looking at the business, but this is the business. I humanize these conversations because without the human part of this, the money doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. It
Absolutely.
doesn't move by itself.
Yeah. It is in the end of the day, money is only rocket fuel, right?
Right,
But you should decide what's the destination of your rocket,
right.
right? So I have a question in my mind, and it pops up if you have described this very clearly. What is spiritual capital to you, and how do you help families to have an, I would call it, a clearer view that it is important that you combine your thinking, your approaches, your discussions with a bigger you in the end of the day, right?
Yes.
So what is it in your description?
Well, when I look at this, I look at it as I look at wealth and capital as an entity and a whole being, right? And I think a lot of times when we think about capital, like you said, we typically think about just the financial part of it, but there's so many different types of capital,
Right.
right? There's human capital, there's emotional capital, there's psychological capital, and that all goes into the financial capital, right? Like that all plays into it. And I think one of the biggest challenges and where I'm seeing a shift, which is great and I love, is the fact that for so long, the only thing that any family was that's talking about is the financial capital. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Nothing else was even considered. And now people are seeing that the the physical, mental, emotional, psychological capital is what's going to actually infuse and make the financial capital so much better. And it's very interesting because when you think like I call it wealth psychology and people, I mean, I didn't make up the phrase clearly, but when people think about that, they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, why do you have to like wealth say, what does that matter? But your relationship and identity with money and wealth is huge, even if you've grown up with it, even if your family has never gone broke or never been without it, even when you have a lot of it, you imagine like the conversations I have with wealth creators who I say, okay, what's your money story? Right? Like, tell me about that. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what's your relationship to money?
Yeah.
Well, I'm obviously have a great relationship. I have a lot of it. Well, no, I'm like, no, but great. But you can have a lot of money and still have a horrible relationship to it. You have a lot of money and be stuck in the identity that all you are as a human is a dollar sign.
Right. Right.
And if that's the case, what happens when things go awry? If, but typically when they go awry,
Yeah.
then your whole identity is wrapped into the finance and the money, and you get lost because you've never known who you were outside of that specific thing. And it's a great thing to start to think about. It's a great thing to explore for yourself because once again, that wealth, that capital, it's only that financial wealth, that financial capital is only one important but small part of the bigger picture. So I think it's time for all individuals and all families to start to explore the other types of capital because that is going to actually make that financial capital 10x more important and 10x more grand, actually.
Yeah, and I want to add it that I mean, for me personally, I mean, I've started my own 100-year family project 1.5 years ago with my kids, and for me personally, just the outlook is your main differentiator is an individual, is a wealth creator, is what type of family have you created?
Right.
I mean, coming back to the point of these term democratization of wealth. I mean, in the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether do you have 500 million or 700 million in your bank account. Yeah, that's nice. You have a lot of power in the end. But the question is, how do you can make change happen over
Right.
centuries as a family, right? And that is just a completely other league, and
Yeah.
and that is just quite helpful. And what I also often see on many levels is, and it would be interesting to pick up your view, is these isolation.
Mhm.
Isolation as an individual,
Mhm.
isolation also as an entire family, if you are
Right.
growing up as a family, right? And many often these individuals come up and say, I don't have any clue how I can solve this problem,
Yeah.
right? And do you have an idea for our audience? What could be your advice if you are confronted with this kind of challenge?
What's really interesting is wealth is it's so beautiful, right?
Right,
God, amazing. And individuals who may not be there just yet always assume that it's it's the answer. Like if I could just get an extra 5, 10, 20, 100 mil, like everything would be okay. Life would be grand, I no problems, no issues, no nothing. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. And I think what happens, like you said, when it comes to isolation and families and individuals, what happens is because individuals feel that from society, they don't give themselves the room or the space to even outwardly talk about these things.
right, right,
Um, and say I'm not happy. I'd say I feel isolated from everybody, everything, although I have everybody and everything possible, and they don't feel like they have the right because what do we see on the news? We have homelessness everywhere. We have this everywhere. We have that everywhere. Everybody's eggs are too expensive. Like life is like blowing up in everybody's face, and you're sitting here like, oh, I have $500 million and I'm sad. But you have the right to feel like that's your truth.
right,
That doesn't take away, this doesn't mean that goes away.
right,
This doesn't mean that's more important, but as an individual and a human, you still have the right to feel the way that you feel. It doesn't matter the amount of money that you have. But that's not what society says. So oftentimes, wealthy individuals and even families are isolated from that and they internalize all of these things because they should just be grateful. Just be grateful that you have a beautiful 10,000 square foot roof over your head. Just be grateful, that you don't have to fly commercial. It's it's hard. Once again, it's a challenge because you almost feel like you're not allowed to be human after a certain dollar amount.
mm-hmm.
And that's not the truth. And you are also afraid of sharing your truth, even when it's amongst other families that may be very similar in wealth status than you, because that is what's told. Like we keep it in the family. We can't say too much because, the other thing is depending on what type of business and the things that you have, like you don't want that going over there. You don't want this going over there. So you are taught to be very secretive, to be very confidential about things, which is in good faith, yes, but also once again leads to these challenges, leads to these problems. And so what I say is there's a lot of trust that needs to happen in the what I call the upper echelon. Not everybody's out to get you, but also, I mean, do you need to be talking about this to a news anchor? No, not sorry, someone on social media?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do you want to share this information with competing families? Probably not. Like maybe not. It
Maybe.
depends on how much,
Yeah.
right? Depends because they might have the same issue. But hopefully, if you're not in competition and if you're in collaboration, then you can have the open conversation. But if you're in competition, which sometimes you don't really know, you have to be able to read people, which is a human thing. We should all be able to read, and also the intuitive thing that most people, what I found in most of my families is intuition is shut off by a lot of people. And I know it seems, I call it like airy fairy or whatever, but we're all given intuition for a reason. It's that knowing because we know, and you've got to trust that. But if you've cut it off, you wouldn't know how to use that. You wouldn't know how to utilize that. That's the one thing that we've been given for free,
Yes.
that if we actually work on it, it's something that can help us for generations to come. It's how mom knows that that woman is the worst thing for you. She just knows it's a thing. We have to figure it out. So I think we've got to learn to trust more. You have to be okay with not being okay. You have to understand that your challenges, especially in the upper echelon, you're not alone in this. You're not weird because of it. You're not ungrateful because of you're feeling this way. And you have to know that there's people out there, such as myself, who can support you and your family in bringing this to light and learning how to alchemize it.
That's true. And it is much appreciated. Also, much appreciated what you are doing in supporting the families. And I will add, from my point of view, there are, I would call it, three boxes. Right. The first box is, and I hear and see this in so many cases. We have or the families, if you want, have the privilege that all knowledge is there. It isn't just as we have met us just in 20 years or 30 years ago, it was only secret and mystical and stuff like that. No, today everything is there, right? And that brings often the question, also, if I said the why is often clear. Yes, you should have a discussion about this, and this, and this, and this. And that brings me just to the second box. And that is what I increasingly more hear is just, okay, if the why is clear, I should do this and this and this and this. Give me just the power of how I can do this constantly, how I can do this perpetually over generation, how I can implement this. And here is just I mean, as better as me. I mean, here comes up the point that many advisors make things so complicated. These how,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that isn't just for the advantage of all, for the benefit of the family. It's just only for the advantage of the advisor, right? But especially the second and third generation raising the right question and raising their voices. And that brings me just to the third box, and it is just that from me personally, and that is just what I drives me, and that is just my vision, 10x or 100x, you can call it whatever, is we need a new movement, a movement of these new kind of families, right?
Mhm.
To come together and build up these tribes these tribes, these strong tribes of significance, right? Yes, that is not for every family, because there are so many families out there that say, okay, we are doing cool. We have our BMW instead, or our Ferrari.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter. We have our house on the lake, and it's fine. We are doing cool. Okay, you have very worked hard for your money. It's fine. But in the end of the day, we need these new force that we can sustain these families, because in regards of their power in their hands, I mean, that is a huge loss for us as a society if they lose their money, right? In the end of the day,
Right.
on stupid things.
Right. Right.
So,
Absolutely.
so that's just my view on this. And so, first of all, I've very enjoyed our conversation today, Shayla, and I will come up with my final question. And I ask this question each of my guests in the talk, and the question is this: if you and I have the opportunity to meet us today in 500 years from now, what is
Right.
your perception on the world of the individuals,
Mhm.
families, and also on the society? What is your view if I put you just on a train and say, okay, in 500 years, let's put it in your calendar, we will see us there?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's a good question. That is hard because once again, I feel like we are living in such a a time that everything is speeding up. And so anything that I feel like anything that I say is going to be absolutely obsolete in like 30 seconds. But what I see for individuals in 500 years is that I see the need for not only individualism, but the need for I don't know how to explain thought. Like, here's the thing. What's being created right now, there's so we don't need to think anymore. Like if you don't ever want to think ever again, you don't have to. Like you talk about the information, we have everything given to us. If I never wanted to have a deep thought again, I don't need to because it's all here for me. So I think as individuals, because one of the biggest things, and we didn't talk about this, we can talk about it later, but that families and everybody is talking about is the increase in AI, robot, all these things are going to replace humans and, all of this. And then the upper echelon of families, like, what does that mean for us? And so when we've created such a way of life where thought is created for you and if you never needed to use it again, I think individualism and being able to think for yourself is going to be the key. It's the same thing when you look at AI. Like you can write a a post in 4 seconds that maybe took you an hour, right? But if you don't check that, if you don't look it over, then eventually you're going to end up sounding like a robot because a robot created it. An individual, somebody else created it. You didn't create it.
Right.
So what do you have to do? You got to check over it. Does this sound like me? Oh, I like this, but I would say it this way. Oh, this is great, but I'm going to change this around a little bit. So thank you for like taking the parts out of it for me, but now let me put me back in. So I think as an individual, that's going to be a huge thing as you see it in the kids, you see it in the schools because it's like, well, what do we teach now? And you used to teach, you follow everything in the book and you've got to, you get the grade because we're teaching for the grade. This is the right answer. This is how but that's not it anymore. Because once again, the right answers can be found on ChatGPT and you can put that on your test. And so, but the kids aren't learning, they're not learning. So the individual, the power is coming back into the individual and having to think when everything is given, how you're going to differentiate yourself is the thought, is the actual thought. not the things, because we can all put we all have the things, we all have the idea. It's all here. So we need to teach, or what we will be teaching, I assume, and the individuals is how to think again, like how this is the thought.
Great.
Um, for families, we touched on this earlier. What is a family? Like the idea of the original traditional family is already being expanded.
Right.
So families will look very different than traditionally, which they're already starting to do. But in 500 years, it's going to be very different. I mean, you could possibly have, a robot in your family. Like, it's fine. Like, it's no big deal. But families are going to look very different, and what we deem a family is going to look very, very different than what it is now. And then the last part, I'm sorry, what was the last one? It
Society.
was society. Society is going to be a mirage. Um, a mix of real and, well, what we know is real, because some people will never know real in their lifetime. That, like, what is it, not Gen Alpha, whatever the next generation after that. I don't know if they're going to know what real is. But I digress. I think society is going to be just this mishmash of beautiful, different types of reality and realms. There's the real, there is the created, and also like AI. There's the spiritual realm. We're going to be weaving in and out of these different types of realities more than we already do, these different types of realms, more than we already do. It sounds crazy, but I just feel like that's going to be the movement where there's already it's really interesting. There's already technology where, and I don't know if this is true, but this is what they're saying. I may believe differently, but I'm sure it's on the way, where they can take grandpa's consciousness, right? Grandpa, who you were used to sit down and talk to, grandpa who you could always come to, and he will tell you the ways of the world, right? He'll always have the best things to say to you. Where you can take grandpa's consciousness and put that into either a GTP or another entity, and you can talk to that.
Great.
That's where we're going.
Amazing.
It's different realms. I don't know if I would do that. I'm like, because I like the memory, I don't know, I'm more spiritual. I like the memory of that, where I can just sit, and I like to believe I can sit with the spirit of those who have passed on and trust that my memory is good enough for that or whatever else. But what is a memory? That's going to be completely changed as well, because you can go in and now technically change what you remember. So I feel like society is going to be a mishmash, like I said, or a compilation of different realities and realms that we all get to play in. It will look very different, past what, in America, we say the Jetsons have created, the cartoon, way past what we can ever acknowledge. But I know it will be beautiful. It's just going to be very different than what we're used to.
What a wonderful outlook. Much appreciated, Shayla. I don't have expected this kind of explanation. So it was fun. It was an honor, and it was nice, and it would be more than happy if we can continue this kind of talk. Maybe on this topic what you mentioned, AI. I mean, it's an increasing topic in each discussion, and nobody knows what does it actually means, right? And there are so many opinions there, and it is just helpful also to give a little bit of a direction, right?
Yeah.
And how do you combine what you called the thinking? I mean, that is what many individuals have lost, their own think,
Yeah.
right? And it
Yeah.
is absolutely requisite. For today, many, many thanks, much appreciated. And I'm very much look forward if we can continue this kind of talk very, very soon, Shayla.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. And yeah, I will happily come back and talk about AI and also how I think that, excuse me, many of our families, especially family offices, are taking a very linear approach, but they need to look, as you know, I'm always about you need to look underneath. There's such a profound way to be able to integrate AI into most of these families that no one's really looking at.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Many, many thanks.
Thank you so much.